What is your relationship to fear? I want you to consider that you have a relationship to what you call fear or anxiety, or maybe you might just call it feeling nervous or on edge. What I found is that the people that live the best lives, and when I say best lives, I just mean that they live the life they want to live. It might not be a life that you want to live, but the people that you find the most inspiring have a relationship to fear that they are willing to feel it. I was working with a client recently who told me that they don't feel fear. And this client has, in their judgment, and also in my judgment as well, a very small life. They have a job that is very easy to them. They have a very, very small network of friends and don't have a significant relationship. They live by themselves. And they were explaining to me that they don't have a problem with fear. They don't have an issue with anxiety. And what I saw was that they weren't allowing themselves to feel anxiety. And they had built themselves a very small life so that they didn't have to feel fear. They didn't have to feel anxiety. They weren't stepping outside of their comfort zone ever. And so they never actually experienced fear. So what had happened is, outside of their awareness, we could call it unconsciously, they had created a life where they didn't have to feel fear, because actually they weren't willing to feel anxiety. They weren't willing to face anxiety in the pursuit of building a life that they love. And what happened with this client is they were feeling deeply unfulfilled. As I said earlier, they didn't have a significant relationship. They had very few friends. They didn't have any hobbies. They didn't live a life that excited them or inspired them, because their relationship with fear was, I'm not willing to feel fear. I'm not okay with feeling anxious. And they didn't even consciously know this. They'd drifted through life, creating their life in such a way that they had a very small comfort zone. When they saw this and they examined their relationship to fear, they started to realize that they didn't have much of a relationship with fear. They avoided fear. They avoided relationships. They avoided growth because they weren't willing to tolerate the discomfort that comes with living a life that they love. So I'm going to invite you to consider what your relationship with fear is. And in order to do that, I'm going to ask you, how often do you feel fear? How often are you willing to put yourself in an anxious state in pursuit of something that's important to you? I remember hearing a quote somewhere along the lines of my journey, and it said something like, do something every day that scares you. And I've seen this battered around a lot over the years, so you've probably heard it too. Do something every day that scares you. Now, personally, I don't do something every day that scares me, but I do feel fear frequently. And when I say fear, let's put fear on a continuum. So you've got kind of dread and terror and panic at the extreme end, and then feeling a bit nervous, feeling a bit anxious, feeling a bit on edge at the lower end. And I experience feeling nervous, on edge, quite a lot, because I'm someone that puts myself out there quite a lot in social media, in my newsletters, in asking someone potentially challenging questions. I kind of feel like I'm going up to the edge and stepping off. And sometimes that's scary for me to do that. But I'm willing to do that in pursuit of A, a life I love, and B, fighting for people to have a life that they love as well. So I will sometimes ask difficult questions to people. And most of the time it goes really well. In fact, almost every time it goes really well, because I'm usually doing it, I'm always doing it for the person that I'm coaching or for myself. So it goes quite well. And I'm willing to feel that fear. And at the end of it, after the fear is done, I feel like I've grown a little bit. So let me ask you again, how often are you willing to feel fear? What is your relationship to fear? If you think about someone that you admire, someone that inspires you, it might be a celebrity or a spiritual teacher or someone you follow on Instagram or whose podcast you subscribe to. Think about someone with a quality that you admire, that you would quite like to be like. Chances are that person has been willing to feel fear in pursuit of their personal growth and fulfillment. And this is what I find about the people that inspire me, is they've overcome something to get to where they now are. They've overcome some challenge, some adversity, some weakness or shortcoming even, and then they're out the other side. And I find that story, their journey, incredibly inspiring for me. Are you willing to feel fear to live a life that you love? There's something in us that calls to us, that tells us we want more. If you were trapped in this room, in this small room, there's something about human nature that just wants you to get out. But imagine that you do get out of this room and then you find that you're now in a bigger room. You're trapped inside a larger space. You then want to get out of that too, and you often try and find ways to escape and find more freedom. And then imagine that you break out of that space and then you find yourself in another space. We're inclined, we're pulled to want more for ourselves. But most of us shut off that need, shut off that desire for personal growth because we get scared. So let's have a quick look at what that fear is. So I'm going to invite you just to get really super present for the moment and consider that maybe even right now you might be feeling a little bit of fear, a little bit of nervousness at the thought of pursuing a life that you love, finding something that fills you up. Usually the first thing that comes up is fear. Now, right now, what is fear in this moment? Fear, as best as I can tell, is you painting a picture in your mind of something you don't want to happen and then emotionally reacting to that picture. The words that usually go along with this picture is what if. But what if this happens? What if I fail? What if I can't cope? What if I upset someone? What if I let someone down? That's the inner voice of fear. And again, let me say this one more time so you really hear this. Right now in this moment, the fear is coming from a picture that your mind is painting and displaying to you in the form of a static image or words or even a video. And then you're feeling the emotional effects of that right now. You're scaring yourself with your thinking. And those things may or may not happen. But they did this interesting study a couple of years ago now where they found that over 90% of our fears, of our worries, of our anxieties don't come true. Over 90%. When I read that study, that was quite reassuring for me because it made me think, so if I think about 10 things that might happen and might go wrong, if I go in pursuit of doing something I want to do, probably only one of those 10 things are going to happen. And maybe none of them will happen. And then you really are only left with one question. Are you willing to pursue a life you love? Taking a risk that something might not go the way that you want it to go. And most people aren't, and that's okay. And you have to decide, are you most people? Do you want to live a life that fulfills you, a life that inspires you, a life that excites you? And if so, are you willing to put up with some fear along the way? Maybe you're not, and that's perfectly okay. But if you're still listening to this, my guess is that there's something in you that wants to get out of that comfort zone, that wants to get out of that box, that wants to escape that room into a bigger space where you are letting out and giving yourself permission to grow, to step into something that is bigger than you, to pursue something for your personal growth. So, what is your relationship to fear?